Thanks, Annalise. Good afternoon, everybody. Kathy Spangler here from Serve Virginia. I apologize, I'm in transit to a meeting on the western part of the state, but wanted to make sure I started off the call today and just welcome you and say thank you for all of the contributions you made to helping us lift up this Virginia Community Engagement Index. Annalise and others are going to give you an overview of all the things that have happened since we came together just about over a year ago now to ideate and imagine what the Virginia Community Engagement might become. We're really excited about the progress that's been made and the utility and the utilization of this index, and so and the interest in it on a national level. So we're really thrilled to have you join us. We want to use your time wisely. I'll turn it back to Annalise and the crew, but I wanted to just say thank you for helping lift up this work. And we hope this is an informative session. And we also hope through this dialogue that we can continue to engage with you and your organizations as we imagine what's next for the Virginia Community Engagement Index. So thanks again, Annalise, back to you.
Thanks, Kathy. And thanks, everyone. I think we've got everyone in the room. We're just really grateful for this opportunity to really kind of highlight and both look back and look forward. So kind of seeing where we've come in a year and looking forward and ahead for what's next on the VCEI front. I just want to kind of celebrate some milestones. So this work kind of got started back in November of 2021. If folks are unaware, Serve Virginia, which 2 years ago was not known as Serve Virginia, but was the Virginia Service Commission, helps facilitate the planning of a state service plan every 3 years. And so in our preparation of the 22 to 2024 state service plan, we learned from our network of partners that there was a huge need for a cross-sector set of data or information that would help us connect service and volunteerism and all the amazing work that's happening around civic engagement, community engagement, civic participation, kind of all of these aligned, related, different intersectional areas of our work that we all see a lot of potential in. And so being able to connect the dots for folks that are outside of the sector and within the sector felt really important to our community. And so that's kind of where a lot of this work started. Over about 3 or 4 months in 2022, starting in about July of 2022, we were on a fact-finding mission and kind of collecting what's already out there, learning from experts like Points of Light and AmeriCorps to better understand what does it mean to measure civic engagement, right? What national data sets can we look at as examples, and how do we start really conceptualizing what this means here in Virginia? A lot of you were here for those conversations, kind of thinking about, there's lots of tools that we could have just kind of bought off the shelf, but really seeing an opportunity to make a very Virginia-specific data set and tool and plan that could help us be really actionable, right? Trying to look at something not only to better understand and to better know and build knowledge, but really finding an opportunity here to use this as a strategy and figure out ways that we can use the information that we're collecting to enhance our work, right? It's not just something that kind of sits on the shelf. So we did a lot of that together July through September of 2022 and kind of officially sort of started forming the core team in October of 2022. If you weren't there in October, no worries. The core team was definitely a living, breathing, iterative process. And so, a lot of us kind of joined in at different points between October and February. We're just so grateful whether you came to one meeting and kind of helped lend an ear, or if you've been engaged through the whole process. When we talk about this project, we talk about the data that we've collected, but oftentimes we're talking about how we got here. I think what has been most impressive both for us and then for the partners and networks that we share this with is really digging into how we did it, because we know that not everybody is as invested in the lives of Virginians as we all are, but being able to really share this as a process that worked has been really impactful, and we have this whole group to thank for that. Thank you for everyone's energies and investment in the process. We fielded the VCEI survey. Folks remember starting in February, and we wrapped up kind of that first or second week of March with some other additional groups that kind of filled in middle to end of March. I don't know if everyone remembers, but it was an amazing process. Hundreds of groups were sharing it, lots of volunteers. I would see it on Facebook from partners that weren't even involved necessarily in the core team, just to kind of see how far the ripple effect went. And we kind of doubled our the responses we received doubled what the goal was that we were expecting. We were expecting around 3,000 responses between the panel that we were purchasing from the research partners, and then also kind of the natural sampling, snowball sampling through the community. And we got over 6,300 responses, which was just an amazing response from everyday Virginians. We're so grateful for the strength that that's lent to the project overall. And then February to April, really kind of digging in and doing that analysis, getting ready to launch the project at the May 2023 Virginia Volunteerism Summit. So a lot of folks were there for that. Were able to kind of celebrate with us as we were able to kind of share it with the larger audience. Some of this was sharing back to folks that had taken the state service plan survey and said that this is what they needed. And so it was great to be able to deliver that and say, look, we have it now. And then also it was great to be able to share this back and really get to celebrate with folks that were either new to the project or many of you were there and able to kind of help speak to the process that we went through to get this really interesting data. Since May of 2023, there's been a lot of work kind of taking the VCEI show on the road. We've done kind of lots of fielding, especially May through July, really kind of getting folks responses to what the VCEI means to them, kind of how they see it kind of tangibly showing up in their work. And then September launched the kind of full reporting. So we have the executive summary and the deep dive appendices that hopefully you've seen on our website that we were able to kind of share with the larger field. So between May and September, really kind of getting all of the insights together, and then in September, really being able to come back together and share those out widely, hoping that we can get the word out kind of far and wide about the availability of the project. And then today we're going to talk more kind of what happened in May through September, but specifically what's happened since September, as we've kind of had the project fully launched with all the reports and sort of how we've seen it been used throughout the community and how it's continuing to show up in some strategic ways throughout the Commonwealth. So since May of 2023, we've had great response. We were able to kind of share it at the summit, which is our largest event, kind of bringing together anybody that falls within that civic and service and volunteerism ecosystem. So most folks that come to our summit are somewhat related to volunteerism, whether they are volunteer managers or volunteer coordinators or volunteers themselves or manage volunteerism at some other, entity, institution, organization. And so we were excited to be able to share with them this amazing tool. We've also, over the past year, had over 4,300 views of the YServe page, which is where the VCEI stuff lives on our website, and have been able to post blogs and social media and different things to really help highlight the impact of the work. Oh, am I not sharing the slides? Well, there you go. That would be helpful, huh?
I see them.
Oh, good. Okay. Let me see. Does everyone else see the slides?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll keep going. But if other folks have any issues, just let me know. So we've had a great response of folks accessing the information, kind of, which is great, knowing that the presentations that we're doing is bringing more people into the fold. We've been able to kind of share both specific insights and then also just the totality of the project. And it's accounted for about 3% of our website traffic, which is really exciting for us, knowing that this is a core and cross-sectional part of what we hope to share with the sector. And then we've had great, engagement with the tools itself. We know that there's a deep kind of interest and or desire for utilization of this data by everyday folks, whether that's at a strategy level, wanting to do a big project, or just as at an informational level, wanting to really help use this data to inform their practice, which is exciting. Happy to speak more to the engagement and reach piece of this if folks are interested in kind of how far and wide it's spread. We've also specifically kind of focused on engaging with people. We know that it's great to kind of put things out into the universe, but we want to know that this is actually being kind of taken up and is useful as folks are really starting to strategize and plan around how they continue to do their work in the future. So we've been really intentional about engaging people with findings. We want to make sure that both, if you've talked to me for any length of time, I'm a data nerd. So I would be happy to sit with the reports and just talk about, what the percentages are and how this, translates to mobilization. But really wanting to have those conversations that take it a step further, that really think about, what does this mean for you, for your organization, for your community? How do we use this in ways to help inform our practice? I come from kind of the social work practice space. And so thinking about evidence-informed and evidence-driven, evidence-based interventions. And so really using this as part of that evidence, right, to inform how we do our work. And then also really thinking about that insights for mobilization and focusing on the action strategies. Knowing, the rate of engagement of Virginians is awesome, but really wanting to make sure that we're then using that rate to do something, right? Whether it's further engage the folks that are already volunteering or engage new populations, we really want to make sure that this is pointing people in a direction that they can then use the VCEI data and use the VCEI strategy and approach to help deepen and further their work. You'll see here on the right-hand side of the slide a couple of different places that we've been able to highlight the VCEI. We've been just so grateful for our partners at AmeriCorps and Points of Light and the American Service Commissions to help highlight this on a national level. We've consulted with a couple of different states that are interested in doing a process like this as well. And then just doing a lot to spread the word here in Virginia, right? We want to make sure that folks that are doing this kind of community-centric work, or civic-centric work, have access to the resources and know that we're here to help support them in utilizing this for action. And then just kind of briefly returning to our goals. If you've been around for a while, this slide might look familiar, but this was kind of what we set out to do from the very beginning, back when this group was coming together in October of 2022. We wanted to establish the benchmarks. We wanted to know kind of how things were stacking up, especially when we were able to compare with national data and think about who the engaged Virginian is and what they might care about. We also want to measure the impact and opportunities, right? So where is this working? Where do we see strengths? Where do we see areas for growth? And then kind of moving on to the second half of this arch, thinking about building and optimizing and leveraging and catalyzing. These are big buzzwords, I know, in the sector, but we really are using them to not only just because I love a good buzzword, but also just really moving us in a forward direction. We want to make sure that this is really, I keep saying the word action oriented, but that we're using this to feed back into what we're already doing, right? That this isn't its own silo, that this is a really cross-sectional approach in our work, and then also, in the approach itself. One way that we're hoping to make the data really accessible is through this interactive dashboard. So through the magic of the internet, I'm going to try and do this flawlessly. You're not even going to notice. I'm going to share with you the dashboard. So this is available on our website. Trying to organize everything. If you go to servevirginia.org and then click Why Serve, you'll see the Virginia Community Engagement Index. And this is really where we're trying to point people to see this is something that they can actually readily access right now, right? We'll talk a little bit later in the presentation about all the different ways that we're developing a strategy and really trying to build something larger around this. But at kind of an individual level, we really want to make sure that folks have access to the amazing data that we were able to capture together. You'll see some high-level insights that folks can kind of utilize just as quick sort of tidbits to grab. And then we have this amazing dashboard. If you're familiar with the site, you're used to seeing the executive summary and the deep dives. They're still here. But then we also wanted to make sure that folks could really dig into what was interesting to them. So we were able to partner with our friends over at the Office of Data Governance and Analytics, which is here in kind of the state agency structure. They were able to help us build this amazing dashboard. This dashboard is an amazing tool if you're interested in kind of pulling specific facts, maybe that aren't in the deep dives. The deep dives give really great state level looks at different insights and findings, but this is a really great way, especially if you're trying to engage a new audience in sharing the VCEI data. Folks are able to hover over these different questions and see the actual survey questions. They're able to click in and then start playing around in the data themselves. We know that this isn't perfect. As a data nerd, there's lots of caveats I want to give around, oh, this is how you can use it and all the things. I'll spare you all of that. But just to give you a highlight and say, this is a really great tool that folks can use to start seeing how this works out for them, right? Our idea is that this is a great kind of way to get folks into the fold and start asking these deeper questions of the VCEI data as they're able to sort of start seeing how this works and looks for either the folks that they work with, the communities that they're a part of, different things like that. Folks are able to dive in looking at these specific questions and are able to filter down by region and or one of these demographic filters. So we have race, gender, income, education, and generation. I think that what this doesn't do, right, is give this really super holistic, our data set is limited in some ways. And so it's not a perfect answer for everything. But what it does do is give someone who's just interested in kind of seeing why this matters to them an opportunity to sort of say, okay, well, I'm in the Eastern region. What does Gen Z think, right? And able to kind of compare across different generations, across different community groups, to hopefully get some ideas going and thinking, oh, I should reach out and see if I can get a project started in my community. We also have more information over here. So hopefully as folks are digging a little bit deeper into the data, that they're also clicking in to see, yeah, what does the deep dive appendices say about that, right? And we're able to connect to more information. Folks are also able to see kind of what the answer counts are. So hopefully, using data wisely, are able to see sort of where there was a lot of responses and kind of be able to draw some conclusions around generalizability and things like that. And then folks are able to kind of click around what's most helpful for them. We have some data around community needs. So looking at where folks are ranking needs, both for the Commonwealth as a whole and for their communities, we're able to kind of look at sort of that volunteer recruitment and retention. So thinking about if I'm a nonprofit program and I'm interested in sort of, either starting a new volunteer initiative or getting folks engaged, kind of seeing who's already out there is a really helpful tool to further engage folks in sort of their existing volunteer work. And then also, the civic action piece, both informal service that folks aren't necessarily volunteering through an organization, but are showing up in their communities with their friends and family. Also doing civic actions like voting. I know that was a big conversation that we had as we were developing the VCEI, is thinking, how do we really capture all of the civic behaviors that go around service and volunteerism, right? That's not the only avenue that folks take. And so really being able to dig into kind of seeing like, okay, yeah, what does this look like across generation, across, different regions, and being able to, ask some questions about why that might be, right? And then finally up here, just kind of thinking more about that, volunteer, especially further engagement, maybe outside of existing communities. So thinking about if your organization is brand new to engaging volunteers, kind of like where you might want to think about getting started. So we're really proud of this as a tool. We're hopeful that this is kind of the launch of the tool. So we're excited to be promoting this more readily throughout the Commonwealth, and excited to partner with you all to find ways that we can help promote the data dashboard to help kind of meet some of those immediate, like, I'm just curious what this looks like kind of questions. This isn't designed to kind of answer every question. We're hopeful that if folks have questions that aren't represented here, that they will reach out to us, which all the information as to how folks can do that is on this page as well. We've had folks, right, that have reached out and said, what does this look like for seniors in, Northern Virginia that are specifically struggling with food access? This data dashboard isn't going to answer that necessarily, but it starts a conversation, right? That we can then kind of think through, right? Yeah, let's look at the data and see what we can start to think about, and if there's a potential project there. And so I'm talking a lot about doing projects and plans, and so I'm going to stop sharing this and go back to the slides, so we can dig in a little bit further to kind of where this has been going outside of the specific kind of data world. So I'll pass it over to you, Susan, to talk about what we've been up to in the Central Region.
Great. Okay. Can you all hear me? I don't know if I'm still on mute.
Yep. Sounds great.
Awesome. Good. Well, I mean, as you can see, there's been a ton of work based on the VCEI data set that all of you helped to develop. And that not only were reports generated and now this new dashboard to easily access that data. We, on a parallel path, or just a little bit after that, really started working with the Central Region on a pilot project to start to say, how can we make this data tangible in ways that a variety of groups can use it? And so we started with the Central Region, and we brought together, just as we did with building the VCEI, about 40 different groups and perspectives together based around the Central Region, with the overall goal saying that we want to build a stronger service, volunteering, and civic engagement ecosystem so we can better meet the needs in Central Virginia. And so we looked at the data, we did interviews and worked with these groups and really came up with a framework, and we'll call it the VCEI framework, that has 5 strategies. They happen to spell serve. So the first one, S, is for key spaces. That actually has 3 parts of it around strengthening and expanding of faith-driven, education, and employer service efforts. So there are really 3 parts of those key spaces. So how do we engage those key spaces better? Another way to build a stronger ecosystem is around equipping nonprofits through convening, training, and resources. So how do we equip them better? The third is, for the R, is how do we leverage national service as part of the community solutions? The V in serve is around voice. How do we enable individuals and organizations to influence policy and increase awareness of the community needs? And then finally, the E in serve, it stands for experience. And that strategy is around enhancing the experience of volunteering and serving in the communities. So basically taking a lot of that data from the VCEI database or data set to pull it into a strategic framework to say, okay, if these are our strategies, how do we do them? Well, there are three real big tactical areas around communicating, around engaging, and around investing. And so the idea was, okay, we now have the data set, we now have a framework to use with the different regions, starting with the central region. Now, how do we get people together to start making those strategies and tactics even more tangible? And that's what Vanessa's going to walk us through of what has been the next step of building projects around each of these strategic areas.
Hey everyone. If I haven't worked with you before, my name is Vanessa Diamond. I'm the Senior VP of Civic Engagement at the Community Foundation here in Richmond, and also serve on the Serve Virginia Commission. I'm an AmeriCorps alum. I'm also part of Point Soleil, their Global Assembly and their board. So I play multiple hats in the civic engagement world, and I just want to say how much I absolutely adore this project so much, because we have been kind of wanting and striving for a data-informed framework for our work for a really long time. And I can say, and I know Megan is here from Point Soleil, it is a huge conversation across the Point Soleil network and organization, as well as how can we use data and evidence to show where there is volunteerism and civic action, where there are gaps, and where there are gaps in the capacity needed to engage people effectively. And so that has really been our rationale here at the Community Foundation of why we wanted to participate in this, and how powerful I feel like a framework like this is. So a couple things, and also just a huge shout out to SIR. This project would not exist without their expertise, but also like their format and framework. And I'm learning a lot about community collaborations right now. And one of the biggest things is that, we can have a vision and we can have collaboration and we can build great relationships, but unless you systemize them and develop a framework, you will go nowhere. And I think that, so just shout out to you all for helping us build this, but also this framework is really vital to where we are in our region right now. There's a lot going on in our region right now, really focused, and some of you all are participating in it or have similar initiatives in your own community, but we are working on something that is a strategic strategy framework for a region with multiple organizations, the chamber, government organizations, foundations, United Way, to develop a visioning agenda for economic mobility, specifically for Black and Brown individuals that have been under-resourced in our community. Lots of things can go into that. There's a whole nother PowerPoint I can give to you on that initiative, but I just want you to know that there's this larger strategy that we have in our region to really try to leverage corporate, government, civic, philanthropic, and nonprofit resources towards a very specific initiative. And what we've done in this, which I think is magical, is we've created this process that you see in front of you, the SERVE, that is going to help build the civic infrastructure of our region in multiple ways. How we do it in faith-based organizations, how we build the nonprofit capacity, how we use national service, how we think about advocacy and community voice, and how we think about individual community members learning and understanding the issues that matter to them. That is a body of work unto itself. And we are using this entire project as an insert into this larger regional framework as a part of our strategy that is going to be lined up with philanthropic additions, with corporate engagement, and with government initiatives. And so this is really playing a kind of a double whammy for us, where we're both building out our civic infrastructure, and then we're taking it and piloting it for a very specific cause. We could do it for lots of different issues. We could tack it on to climate change issues. We can tack it on to, anything. We happen to be using this to really focus in on
this framework that we're trying to build for our region. So a couple things I just want to mention. I think I only have a couple minutes, so I just wanted to really talk about, and a couple of you all are on these committees, but each one of these sections is run a little bit by SIR and Serve Virginia, who is helping, the VISTA members are helping us, again, build some structure and framework as we pilot this for the region, and hopefully it can be replicated in your own communities. But each one of these has a committee of volunteers who come from business, they come from corporate social responsibility, they come from faith-based organizations, from public and private schools, from government organizations, nonprofits, statewide nonprofits that are coming together to develop action plans in these areas. Some of the ones that I just want to highlight that I think are really important because they're helping us do things, but the two of them that you'll see here are really just about landscape analysis and SWOT analysis. And that in itself, I think, is a huge thing to note, is that whatever your community is, you might come out of this with a very specific project, right? The youth education component committee is probably going to have some sort of event or a summit. It's going to be a tactical, tangible thing that is going to help convene, leverage, inspire, and build the capacity of educational institutions to engage students and teachers and their constituents in service and volunteerism. But if you look at voice, really where we are in our ecosystem is we don't know who is doing advocacy in our region. We don't know what nonprofits have legislative agendas. We don't know what kind of nonprofits have the ability to train and engage their ambassadors or their volunteers or their board members to engage in advocacy. We're not sure what types of policies and laws are happening or in discussion on a local, state, or national level that can influence the things that are important to us. So we've got to pause for a second and do a landscape analysis so we could know what we need for 2025 and 2026. So I just wanted to explain like the flexibility. There's a framework here, but it's really flexible, I think, to meet your community where it is. In some of these pillars, we're able to execute an event or a process or a resource. And in some of them, we're like, hey, we need to figure out what's really going on so then we could bring maybe more funders or more nonprofits or government organizations into the work so we know what the right next step is. And each of these have really allowed us to kind of meet the process and the community where it is. So I think that's all I wanted to say about where we are. Definitely when we get to Q&A, I can answer any questions about where we are from the Community Foundation's perspective. But I can just say that for us, this is creating not just a framework for civic engagement for the foundation, but for our region, and then really this incredible additive into this larger scale work that we're doing here locally. I will pass it back. I'm passing it back to Annalise. Okay.
Yep. And I just want to, applaud the Community Foundation for really kind of taking a step to lead this work in their region. Our hope is that this kind of starts off an ever-growing, living toolkit of sorts, right? So that any community, any organization, any region could come and say, we really want to do work in our key spaces, or we want to take the whole SERV plan and leverage it against a regional strategy. There are lots of different ways that this plan can operate and can be implemented across different community levels. And then I will kind of share. So we personally are doing this, right? Where we looked at the SERV framework and really identified that there was an opportunity here for AmeriCorps planning grants. Just as a background, if you're not familiar with AmeriCorps is a national service program. So it engages Americans, Virginians in this case, in their in work that serves their community. So we, as the State Service Commission, work with planning grantees that are building AmeriCorps programs, and we've identified that planning grantees often have a need to be really firmly situated in their community and their regions as part of the strategy working to address a community need. And so we saw the opportunity to use the VCEI process and plan as a tool that we could provide to them and kind of do this process and to help establish them as a resource, as a networker convener within their community. So we've kind of taken the plan and sort of shrunk it just based off of timing and resources. So they're focusing on 3 of the core strategies. They're focusing on leveraging national service, enhancing experience, and equipping organizations, and thinking about how are we, leveraging partnerships and existing work that's already going on and the future national service program that's going to be implemented to really help kind of be leveraged up against this larger need. So it's really kind of taking the focus off of what is one specific program going to accomplish. In this case, what is one specific AmeriCorps program going going to do, and really helping to contextualize and convene around this larger strategy. And so then it's not all of us just kind of moving separately in one direction, but it's all of us working together to kind of help lift up resources and opportunities to serve in the community to really help address critical community needs. And then I'll also just share a little bit about kind of very immediate next steps, right? And so in addition to the work going on in the Central region, the AmeriCorps planning grants, we'll have kind of regional convenings in the next couple months. We're also looking at presenting the VCEI to elected officials next week. So Kathy and I are honored to be able to take this in front of some members and staff of the General Assembly to really help a wide variety of audiences think about how this makes an impact, right, on the district constituent level. We're also presenting at the Points of Light conference in June in Houston. So we're excited to be able to bring this back, right? We talk about this a lot at the state level, but we're really excited to be able to bring this to a national and international audience to think about, you know, what we learned from this process, what we learned, right, this whole group together, so we can share that out and other communities can think about what their VCEI or, you know, CEI journey could be. We're also presenting at the Virginia Funders Network Conference the first week of May, and thinking about how we're integrating this more deeply into our AmeriCorps funding strategies moving forward. And so just really excited to be able to share with you that we're sharing this out widely. We're really excited to come alongside you. So if there are opportunities that you have that you would love for VCEI to be a part of, we'd love to talk with you about what that can look like. And then also just like letting you know, right, your work is being shown on these platforms. We are honored to be a part of the process, and we're honored to help facilitate. But like Vanessa said, I mean, with your help, with the help of SIR, the Community Foundation, I mean, there's so many partners, too many to name, but we are really grateful for the way that we were all able to come together and make this a reality. And then we're also, always looking forward, right? So the Virginia Community Engagement Index is planned to be an every 2-year deployed survey. And so excited to start thinking about what does the next iteration look like. And I'm going to pass it off to SIR to kind of help us think through a little bit about the purview of the VCI moving forward.
Hey, thanks, Annalise. And thanks, everybody. So nice to see all of you again. For those I haven't seen in a while, since we were knee deep in coming up with the survey instrument and sending out survey links and all of that good stuff. You've just heard a lot of information about how this data is currently being leveraged, how it can be leveraged in the future, how it's going to be leveraged in the future. And one of the things that we've found as we've continued to meet with stakeholders around this and using this data set for planning purposes is that it can take a little while for the insights to click. Because it's a massive data set. You all know it took a lot of time to come up with these questions and to distill them down and make sure that it was a survey that didn't take 20 minutes long for takers. And so it can be a little tough to find your way in. And then once you're in, you can get so deep in that you can start to lose the forest for the trees. And so the way we like to kind of contextualize this for folks, and if you take anything away from this meeting or as you go into the dashboard, it's these kind of 4 buckets on how this can be applied and how it's currently being applied. And that's really at the individual level, organizational level, network level, and then from the community collective level. And so if I am, if I can take this, anything that I do today, and what findings can I take to use in my day-to-day work? Well, if I'm in the process of volunteer recruitment, for example, I can go to that dashboard and I can say, you know what, I got to get younger volunteers. What's motivating younger volunteers? What do they want to get out of their volunteer experiences? The more I know about their motivations and expectations, the more I can craft messaging and recruitment and craft the experiences they have to deliver on those, right? From an organizational level, maybe my organization or agency has been really focused on philanthropy, right? But if I go and see that folks, say I'm a housing organization, and folks say, you know what we don't need philanthropy, we need policies. And I'm in the housing sector and I've been focusing on philanthropy. Well, maybe it's time for me to go to my organization, or as a leader of my organization, to go to people within my organization and say, hey, what are we doing on policy? Should we consider some shifts in how we're prioritizing our actions? And then networking, it's the same. It's kind of taking what I'm doing organizationally and saying like, hey, I just learned about this. It's influencing these things for my organization. Have you seen this? Love to sit down and talk with you about it. And then this collective capacity is really what Vanessa and Susan were sharing. And that is, how do you start to align all of the resources? We're all swirling around each other. We all want to help our communities. We all want to build the civic infrastructure, leverage the power of our people, our employees. How do we start to just know what each other's doing so that we can actually harness that energy and pull in the same direction? And so, like I said, it can be daunting sometimes with a data set this big, but really there are bite-sized chunks that you can take off as an individual and your day-to-day work, and then how you work with others in your organization, and then how you work within your network. And so this is kind of a good way that we've found to kind of contextualize how to use this and how to apply it. And then as we apply it, we also are kind of keeping our eye out on opportunities for what the next iteration of this can be. As you remember from those guides or from the goals that Annalise shared and that have been the goals since we started this, we wanted to establish benchmarks, and then we also want to measure our success against those. And so we have an opportunity to hopefully do this again in 2025 and do it again down the road. And we want to continually learn. We had great input from all of you in this room that helped us set this up. And then the more that we all collectively use this data, we're going to find ways that we can be more intentional in how we outreach with underrepresented populations. That's been a key strategy that's come out of all of this, is that we need to do it, but we also need to be more intentional about how we gain information, how we ask for information from these populations, how we share it back, and how we communicate that. And so just getting this group, who has been so involved and instrumental from the start, to think about how we can be more intentional. We got a lot of diversity. We got representative diversity through our approach. But we can always do better, and we can always lift those voices up in ways that give us a greater understanding and nuanced understanding of what these populations and communities that we're really trying to serve, our own and others across the state, what's really impacting them, and what value do they see in some of this. Similarly, from the assessment itself, what are some opportunities for us to refine some of the questions we asked? We might find that there are still gaps in knowledge that we want to fill, and how can we use this opportunity moving forward to get at some of the knowledge that we want and that our stakeholders are saying that we want through using this data to plan. So continuing to think about how we can refine this survey to get greater, deeper knowledge, nuanced knowledge that is, again, unique to Virginia and what we're going to be using this data for. And then again, starts here. It's been happening in the central region, as Annalise and others have said. There's been presentations. So again, just trying to be intentional about how we engage stakeholders like you all, your organizations, to continue to develop the strategic insights and recommendations. And again, continuing to engage and support organizations in how they use this and leverage this data and some of the processes and frameworks that we're putting into place to benefit their organizations and communities. So lots happening, lots to look forward to. I'll toss it back over to Annalise so we can kind of talk about some next steps and hopefully have some conversations about what you've just heard and what you all think.
Yeah, so I've got some plugs at the end, but I did want to just kind of pause here. Thanks so much, Andy. And just kind of open it up for conversation. Any reactions, any immediate thoughts that come to mind? There's been some great conversation in the chat about how this kind of continues to move forward, and would love to hear from kind of anybody in the room if there are either questions that you have based off of what you've heard, comments that have come to mind as we've been talking, opportunities that you've identified sort of throughout the presentation. Would love to just kind of pause here for any of that conversation.
I have a question. I recently came upon the term civic health, and I noticed there was a heavy political kind of a pull to that information and how we can use that. And so I'm wondering how best to implement certain activities around civic health when it comes to volunteerism, and specifically with internal programs that you might have.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. So I'll kind of speak to it at a couple of levels. I think that civic health is always a really interesting measure. Civic health, I think, generally, and I could be totally wrong, so folks jump in and correct me, but civic health generally looks at a more national data set than what the VCEI looks at. And so I think that there's a really interesting kind of integration there of looking specifically at kind of these civic health behaviors and looking at that kind of through the lens of the VCEI and how that relates to service and engagement. This group kind of had some conversations early on around that between the terms of like civic health versus community engagement. And there was a study put out by PACE that kind of talks a little bit about the different dynamics that terms bring. For folks that are interested, we looked at the 2022 study when we were developing the VCEI, but the 2024 studies just came out. And so happy to link those in the follow-up email. But I think that that's a great point of kind of how do these things all work in tandem? I know we've just been really grateful to work with ORE on AmeriCorps Office of Research and Evaluation on a webinar that thinks about how some of these different data sets come in conversation. So thinking about promoting civic behavior and then also thinking about the actual community engagement piece of that. So I'm talking around it a little bit. I don't know if that answers your question, but I would say yes, and that yes, this is somewhat measuring civic health. I think that it's measuring it through a different route. Really interesting to put those two things in conversation. And Andy came off mute, so I'll pass it to him for a more concise response.
Oh, I don't know that I ever went back on mute, but I'll definitely respond a little bit. And Laura had a good question about whether we are talking about the National Conference on Citizenship's Civic Health Index or the term more generally. To Annalise's point, when we started, we went to the NCOC to see what their process was and what their data was. And then we brought that back to some of the stakeholders in this room and others and found that civic health just didn't quite encompass all of what we wanted to learn. And to your point, Amanda, there was, and that Annalise referred to, a study release that showed the kind of political or politicized nature of the word civic, and the degree to which we wanted to use that term versus community engagement. I think what it all boils down to for us and folks in this group is the terms that we use are important, and the more that we are in the room together, the more we can understand what these different terms mean to the different stakeholders that we have. So when it comes to a program that's aimed at boosting civic participation in the voting process and the political process, then that's the appropriate term to use in a lot of cases. But when we're talking about service and volunteerism, that isn't necessarily civic health. That's kind of a different thing. And so the more we just have the conversations around these topic areas, I think the more terminology will get ironed out. But that's just kind of my own personal opinion.
Thank you, Andy and Annalise. Thank you for those answers. I think I guess I was looking at civic health and like it doesn't seem to be as related to civic engagement from my thought process and what I had been reading on it. And so I was like, I don't know if this is something we can kind of incorporate into that. But yeah, thank you.
And there's also, Amanda, I know that you work for a healthcare organization. And so when the term health gets connected with civics, and that opens up a whole other kind of package of terms and conceptions and associations. And so it can be hard to wade through that. But thanks for the question.
Thank you.
But Laura has a comment here, which I think will be very helpful in pulling the NCOC data and the AmeriCorps pieces together.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. I'm Laura Schlachter. Excuse me. I work in the AmeriCorps Office of Research and Evaluation, and we've been just super honored to be a part of this project. Annalise and Kathy spoke at our webinar last week and just were fantastic. I'm just curious. So I think the term, just to kind of put it out there, the term civic health is sort of a colloquial term that I think people use in different spaces in different contexts. NCOC has a specific body of research, and I think they've trademarked the term Civic Health Index. And I would be happy to sort of concretely explain like how they go about doing that. But I will say that AmeriCorps uses the term civic health sort of much more broadly in just saying that, every 2 years, we conduct a national survey that looks at certain indicators of certain civic indicators. Some of those are kind of in a more formal institutional context, like volunteering through an organization. Others are, simply helping your neighbors informally, and taken together. Our legislative mandate from Congress is to leverage those like indicators to kind of paint a picture of the nation's civic health. And so we use the term in that context. So we'll say, our data takes the pulse of the nation's civic health. So when I think of that term, I think of it as typically like looking at multiple different metrics of civic engagement and like take kind of in a more holistic picture, taking them together to sort of look at an assessment of like the vitality of civic life in a specific place. And that could be at the national level. It could be at a very local level. That's a much more general conception than National Conference on Citizenship's kind of trademarked Civic Health Index, which is like their thing. So
that makes more sense. As it being an index for viability in a certain area, and how that's looking in the area. That makes more sense to me then. I was thinking there was some way to incorporate civic health into volunteerism, and I don't believe we mesh, I think there's a conflict of interest there, especially in my role with healthcare, to kind of mix civic health with civic engagement. I don't know because I see a lot around
what
voting.
I would say is that, yeah, I mean, I would say that actually volunteerism is it's often one of the metrics that's incorporated into discussions about civic health.
Okay.
And at AmeriCorps, we think of civic engagement as like the umbrella term for all of the various ways that people make a difference in their community. It's a little bit different than the terminology that Sir Virginia has been using, but I think of civic health as sort of like a composite. It's almost like trying to do almost a qualitative assessment, kind of that ranks the civic vitality of different places, if you will.
Okay. Yeah.
That's how I think of it. And one of the metrics that would go into that is often volunteerism.
So how does volunteerism look for civic health? What is that exactly?
Let me try to, like, because I hear where you're coming from. So the way I think about this is there are all these metrics of like what an individual can do, but like aggregate of a community. Let's just say I'm looking just at the city of Richmond. There's a population in Richmond. What is the percentage of people that vote? What is the percentage of people that feel like they trust their government? What is the percentage of people who are volunteering, who help their neighbors, who give philanthropically? Let's just say there's 6 indicators we look at.
Okay.
And then collectively, we pull all of that together and we analyze it and say, okay, the civic health of this region is disengaged because it's got lower rates than XYZ.
Okay.
And so it's like kind of like your health is your physical health is a composite of your blood pressure, your cholesterol, your BMI. All of those things are individual things, but together it's like your general health is you're generally healthy. Or your doctor is like, you might need to work out a little bit more. You might need to stop drinking coffee after 3 o'clock, whatever it is. So I think the health part is overall analyzing like what a region or an area is. When I think about our data, I think something that we've got to think about, and this is why I was bringing up earlier about how do we partner with AmeriCorps' national data and where Points of Light might be heading with some research agenda is this specific data set is focused on people who are already engaged. They are most likely already connected. It's not the average bear. And so that is a layer of looking at civic health. But the work that AmeriCorps has is looking at everybody because it's coming out of the census. Is it coming out of the census? Did I make that up? I don't know. Okay, good. Right. So they're looking at like a more general civic health. And then this is like a slice of it. So we start to compile like what AmeriCorps is doing and what this is doing. Then we have a holistic view of like the different layers of what a community would need to be actively engaged. Does that make sense? Or is that like, okay, yeah.
Sorry, Vanessa, thank you. That was so much. That was what I was trying to say and failing to articulate. I just want to say, though, that there's a ton of debate about what indicators should go in, right? Because bad data in, bad data out. If those indicators are responsive to what's actually happening on the ground, right? And if you can even quantify something like civic health. And so I just to acknowledge there's a lot of debate. And I think, again, that's what VCEI is bringing to the table is you're looking at so many more dimensions than we could possibly, than typically are captured. Like typically civic health is like a very crude measure, just like, you know, BMI is a very crude measure.
Yeah. And I would say like for me, just as like a practitioner in this field, I know that this is all imperfect. Right. This is just like a gauge. Just like, all right, this is what we think is happening. This is what people are saying. Are there interventions that as a funder or a volunteer action center or, you know, an AmeriCorps program, are there things that we can put in place in our community that could impact one of those tiny measures and see if it has an impact later? I think we're all kind of testing the waters and using this data as a way to help guide, because there's 1,000 things we could do. Help us. This is helping us choose a couple of pathways forward to see if they work and if they move any of the numbers forward.
I would just tag on to that. So excited for this kind of conversation because I think that this is always where this space is most helpful. And then there was a great question in the chat asking about kind of the timeline for this, and I think that the hope is that the larger VCEI survey is fielded every 2 or 3 years. We're hoping for 2 years now at the current pace, and so every 2 years we're putting out this big survey and getting these benchmarks right, being able to compare to baseline, how we see trends changing and shifting, and so we're looking forward to also, as we continue to grow in understanding, be able to evolve our analysis and promotion of the information, right? And so thinking about like, is there a composite score that can come out of the VCEI to help those of us that work at state, regional, or statewide levels be able to say, like, compare communities, right? And not in like a deficit-based way, but just to be able to kind of say, really strong in this area of, activity, lower in this area, or high engagement here, and opportunities for growth in this other. And so I think that we're, eager to have these kinds of conversations with partners to kind of think through, right, like, what does this look like? What would help you better use this data? How do we continue to grow in the tools that come out of this data so that we can continue to promote that usability and that action orientation of the project? Great question, Amanda and Peppy. Any other thoughts, questions, comments?
I do have another.
Yeah, please.
When it comes to the benchmarks provided for various industries that you might be in when it comes to civic engagement, is that something that is included in the current research or data, and if not, would that be included in the 2025?
That's a great question. So I think that the data that's out there now kind of serves as almost like a baseline since it's the first time we did it. And so looking at it as kind of the mark in the sand currently. And then I think as we move forward, we'll be able to do a little bit more comparisons of like 2023 to 2025 as a data mark. I will say we can pull, so from the data dashboard, folks can kind of pull information specific to their region, or maybe some demographic information that's applicable to their audience or population that they serve. We are eager to partner with folks that are interested in digging in deeper. So if you have a project idea where it's like, oh man, I'd love to use this with this specific audience, we have, like Andy said, this data set is massive. So there's lots to dig into there. And we can definitely kind of talk through sort of what opportunities might be out there and help sort of conceptualize if you're interested in sort of launching a project, mini report or something like that could more comprehensively speak to the work that you do. So like whether it's like from an employer's angle or from a healthcare angle, just as like a couple of examples, we might be able to help think about like how we can better package the data if what's out there already doesn't kind of meet your needs. A great question.
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to tag on to that, there are lots, and that you'll see in this slide, in that middle part of the assessment is developing a composite score. So in our initial analysis, we performed driver analysis to figure out, okay, which motivations have the most impact on whether or not someone has volunteered in the past 12 months. And so when we think about benchmarks, if we know that people who continue volunteering because they feel a sense of appreciation, well, then we know that we have some work to do to make sure that our volunteers feel appreciated. And so hopefully, if we work with volunteer management professionals and we work with organizations to say, hey, what are you doing to thank your volunteers, to make sure that they feel that they see the impact of their work, over time, we'll see that indicator improve, right? And so we have a lot of key indicators that we can start to bundle to say, hey, if we do this as part of volunteer experiences, or if we do this as part of recruitment, we should see this indicator improve, which then it becomes an indicator that more people are out there in their communities volunteering. And then, as Annalise said, from the employer perspective, we ask very specific questions around how people want their employers to engage them and the degree to which their employers are currently. And so as an individual employer or as a collective of employers or businesses in the region, you can use that indicator to say, hey, you know, we did these things to try to listen to our employees and give them opportunities to participate in their communities and community events, and we're seeing that indicator is growing or improving.
Yeah, absolutely. And Andy, you didn't even know, but that was a great segue into sort of where we're headed next. And so it's not on the slide specifically, but I will just kind of spotlight. I'll send out a follow-up email from this meeting with the recording, with some links to different places and spaces that you can find more information. So I'll link the data dashboard. I'll link some recent webinars that we've done if you're interested in kind of learning more about any of these specific topics. And then also specifically, I'll highlight, so the Virginia Volunteerism Summit is May 15th and 16th. It's a 2-day virtual event. It's the leading event in the Commonwealth for organizations that contribute to this civic and service ecosystem. And so we'd love to see you there. I'll send out the registration information for that if you or any of your partners are interested in joining us. I'll highlight that we are going to do workshops around the VCEI, so workshops around the data dashboard. We'll be spotlighting the SERVE framework. So if you're interested in learning more about that strategy, that'll be a great place to be. And then we also are going to be launching a learning kind of toolkit where we'll have one-pagers specific to folks that do this kind of volunteer management-y kind of work, providing data-driven resources to really dig in deeper to what this conversation looks like. Kind of outside the VCI very specific lens. We're also busy kind of promoting civic infrastructure, right? And doing it in partnership with a lot of you here today. We're focusing on kind of how do we incentivize national service. So we're engaging with elected officials around what civic infrastructure looks like in their communities, and then how they can use community and national service to help meet critical community needs and kind of invest in their constituents or their community members. We're also promoting opportunities for folks to join in with AmeriCorps. So if this has gotten you interested in AmeriCorps, if you've talked with me for more than a couple minutes, you probably already know this, but I am eager to talk to you about what AmeriCorps can look like in your community, whether that's at your organization or through a partner organization. You know, always open to conversations about where the VCEI can go. And, you know, I've no commitment down. Happy to talk with you about what's interesting to you of this work and how we can kind of dig in deeper and leverage this to help use a data perspective to the work that you're already doing. And then we'll also be promoting some of our volunteer awards programs. So we've got the Governor's Volunteer Awards will launch May 15th. We're excited to share that opportunity to nominate the volunteers in your life that you know are making a big difference, and be able to dig into recognizing amazing service that's happening across the Commonwealth. So those are my plugs. I'm so grateful again for everyone taking the time out of your Wednesday afternoon. Grateful for the time that you've invested in this project. Again, this project would not exist without everyone here today. And so just very grateful and eager to help you in any way we can. So please feel free to reach out if you need anything, and I'll be in touch soon. Thanks, everyone. Have a great rest of your day.